The following program is video supplemental instruction. VSI is brought to you by the Teaching Center, UF's Learning Support Center, www.teachingcenter.ufl.edu.
Alright, so for number 3 we're trying another series for convergence or divergence. So we have the sum here as n goes from 1 to infinity of the function 7, or sine of 7 over n. So this is a pretty tricky problem, mainly because it's kind of counterintuitive. If you try to do this by test for divergence, just in case you were worried about that, it's pretty obvious that as the limit as n goes to infinity, this inside becomes 0 and sine of 0 is 0. And those numbers would be getting incredibly small all the time. It seems like this function should converge, but to prove it is a different story. The easiest way to do this one, or possibly the only way to do this one, is by the limit comparison test. So remember that limit comparison test? You compare the limit of this series divided by the limit of another, and if you get a positive constant, you get that the limits have the same convergence or divergence properties. So what we're going to compare sine of 7 over n to, we're going to call that our a sub n. What we're going to compare that to needs a little bit of creativity to see, but if you recall from Calc 1, you went over a trig identity that sine x over x is 1 as long as x approaches 0. So we want to choose what's inside this sine function. We want to choose 7 over n. So limit comparison test says if you limit as n goes to infinity of sine 7 over n over 7 over n, we'll be able to tell what's going on here. As n goes to infinity, these quantities are going to 0, so you effectively do have sine x over x as x goes to 0. This is clearly going to be 1. So what that tells you is that those two functions, sine of 7 over n and 7 over n, have the same convergence and divergence properties. 7 over n is a harmonic series, which we know from in the class that diverges. That must mean that sine of 7 over n is divergent. Contrary to all intuition here about what that seems like, this is actually going to be a divergent series.
The Teaching Center, UF's Learning Support Center, www.teachingcenter.ufl.edu.